What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host, a very full host, actually. Me and my wife just got back from a delicious meal at Carmela's in Southside. We went down there it's Restaurant Week, if you did not know. What Restaurant Week is people, go out of their way to make a menu, and it usually is 3 courses. You got a appetizer, a main course, and then a dessert. And my wife, she said she was on the bus and saw it advertised, so we looked it up, and the menu looked dope, and we went down there, and it was awesome. I've always heard about it. I've never been there. And I think I've never been there is because, if you look in the front window, it looks like it's basically like 10 foot wide and 50 foot long. There's 10 tables, but it just looked real small. But we ended up going in there, and you walk back and it opens up into this big room, and it's actually a super dope room. It's the decor is very very Swiss Alps meets a thrift store, kind of, I guess. Yeah, but in a good way. They have a fire pit in the middle of this dining room. I don't know. It's just a bizarre, it's a wild ass building, but the menu was super good. We had arancini, we had or arancini. I don't even know how to pronounce it, and I ain't gonna pretend I know how. But the entrees was roast duck. I had a lamb shank. It was just, it was banging. All of it was so good. And in the end, they give you this dessert. So we both got desserts, and I was like, I'm trying to get a coffee, obviously. I need that little fix. So I was like, let me get a coffee. And they bring you out a French press with a timer. They bring you out this timer with it, and it's just, I don't know, it's a cool spread. You usually just get a cup of coffee from someone, but they bring out your own French press, a little egg timer next to it, and they're like, wait till this is done, press the plunger down and then pour the coffee and enjoy it. And it was honestly, everything was just really great. We had a good meal, and I feel like that's relative to this podcast because, me and my guest this week, we shared a meal together. We talked about food, of a good bit of it. And, I guess the reason everyone's here, we'll talk about that, is my guest this week is the voice of Pittsburgh, Rick Sebak. And, whenever you hear the name Rick Sebak, you think of WQED, you think of Kennywood Memories, you think of a hot dog program, you think of Pennsylvania diners and other roadside restaurants. And I said that, anytime I post pictures about who I'm going to have on the podcast, I think of a little write-up, and I try to make a little paragraph about these people and what they're kind of known for and what we brush on the topics. And I said that if Pittsburgh had a Mount Rushmore, I think Mr. Sebak would be on there. I feel like that, he's the voice of Kennywood Memories, come on now. But all these people have messaged me since I started this podcast and said, you should get Rick Sebak on. He would be a fantastic guest. And I understand that he would be a great guest. He is a great guest, but I had to get my feet under me. He's a big deal. He's a big get. So I wanted it to count. And we're interviewing, and everything is just so fantastic. The dude is just a great person, and it was very I don't know. He was just fun to talk to. It's I don't even know how to explain it. I was just, kind of blown away. We were sitting there talking about Kennywood, and I'm listening to that guy that narrated the Kennywood video that we all seen in school. And, it was really just a cool experience. And I was pumped that this podcast has kind of been able to, bring me a way to be able to do that with a lot of awesome people. I mean, we talk about him growing up and, what it was like growing up and how he was and what he did in high school and theater group and starting a theater class and, starting a theater group. And then we talk about, how he got into TV and producing. And, it was just a really fascinating story. I mean, he always is talking about other things. He's always highlighting the topics of other things. I wanted to highlight the topic of him, I mean, he does such a great job at, explaining the history. Jesus, someone beeping out there, causing a ruckus. But he does such a great job at explaining and going into detail and showing the care in his topic. I wanted to be able to do that with him. And we were recording, and I see that he went to go sip his coffee and it was empty, and I wanted to get him another coffee. And he was like, "How long have we been recording?" And I said, "About an hour." And he was like, "Is this too long?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "I don't want to bore people." And I was like, "Rick, come on now, bore people? He could never bore people." I was just sitting there in awe, listening to him talking to me about all this crazy stuff with our wonderful city. And I'm excited to drop this episode for you guys, and I'm excited for you to listen to it. And, take a second, and if you can, go check out his social media. He is basically all the best places to eat, he has been there. He posts about it. And I actually got to go share a meal with him at my favorite place, Streets on Carson. I talk about it on here all the time. But Matt and Lauren, they're such great people that it's hard not to talk about them. I texted Rick whenever we were kind of scheduling this interview, and I was like, "Hey man, I would love to take you to, my favorite restaurant if you'd love to come." And he was like, "Absolutely." So we went down there. Matt and Lauren opened up a little bit early to let us slide in there. And, of course, Chef Matt brought down an entire spread of all the best things. And, me and Rick were just sitting there, sharing a meal, talking about awesome things. He was explaining to me about the beginning of a Turkey Devonshire taking place in Pittsburgh. I guess the Turkey Devonshire was invented here. Fun fact for you. But it was just cool to hear this, because obviously Streets on Carson, if you guys didn't know, they are proud contributors to Turkey Devonshire items on their menus. You know what I mean? They have a great one. It was on the cover of a magazine, and the actual creator of the Turkey Devonshire, he wrote it off. He wrote it off as a great interpretation of his meal. So me and Rick were down there just talking, and it was just such a great time. I appreciate Matt and Lauren very, very much at Streets on Carson. If you have not tried that place yet, I don't know what you're doing. Go down there, street foods from around the world. Tell them the podcast sent you. You could literally order anything off that menu, and you will be happy with it. But without further ado, episode 101 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with Mr. Rick Sebak.
Telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back. Call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast.
All right. Still feel like I'm starting the morning.
Starting the morning?
But I was up at 7:30.
Are you an early riser usually?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
I'm far better in the morning than I am later, yeah.
Yeah, I used to be the opposite. Whenever I was younger, I would have problems going to sleep. And now I go to sleep at 9 o'clock, and I can't sleep past 6:30, ever. It's a shame.
Well, while I'm not doing therapy anymore for this leg. While I was doing therapy, I had to be there at 7.
Oh.
So I was getting up at 5:30.
Jeez.
And I find that occasionally I'll still wake up at 5:30.
Yeah. Yeah, I get up for...
Today, I went to bed last night and I slept till my alarm went off at 7:30. So,
Well, that's good.
yeah.
It's not as bad. Like, now that like I'm in the, ever since I got a real job and became a professional, I took away any sleeping inabilities that I have. But your leg, when did that happen?
August 28th, 2018.
2018, and I just came across your 7 weeks in McGee, but I mean it should be called 7 weeks of food.
Right, it's a food show.
Yeah, that was an outrageous amount of delicious food.
Really incredible.
Yeah, and my wife was sitting here with me, and she was like, "I've never seen." She was like, "Are you writing all these places down?" Because we've never heard of a lot of them, and
Yeah.
a lot of those places are hidden gems, I would say.
Well, and it was all a surprise to me, so it was really, really nice.
Yeah, and I have to be. I'm usually very transparent with everything here, and in the beginning, I didn't know too much about you. So whenever I started this podcast, I started about 2 years ago, and I knew of you through Kennywood, the Kennywood Memories,
Right.
and the narration through there and everything. And I've always heard of your name. Excuse me, and then I ended up seeing your Kickstarter a while ago for the Nebby,
Right.
and then a lot of people will message me and recommend people to have on here all the time, and you were a name that I've got for the last 2 years since I started. Immediately, whenever I started, people were like, "You need to get Rick on here and talk to him," and I'm just like, I mean, maybe once I get my feet under me, because you're a Pittsburgh staple.
Well, you know what I say? It's longevity.
Longevity.
Yeah.
When did it start here? When did your stint in Pittsburgh start here?
Well, I was born here.
I know that, but you've been.
I had moved away. I was away for 16, 17 years.
Yeah.
After I graduated from high school, I went to school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at UNC.
Yeah.
And then I got my first job in public television in South Carolina, and I worked there for 11 years.
11 years.
So for about 16 years, I'm not in Pittsburgh. I had no great desire to come back to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But I was just telling this to someone last night. There were a bunch of guys that, we all worked together in South Carolina. And we sort of had a pact that if anyone got their 10-year pin, the others would kill him. And I was there 11 years. And one of these guys had gone on to work for public television in Denver. And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, Rick, there's an ad in Broadcasting Magazine. You should answer." And I said, What? And he said, "It's for a producer." And I said, "Where?" And he said, "Pittsburgh." And I said, "Oh, do I want to go back to Pittsburgh?" My station there in South Carolina had just sent me to Australia for 28 days.
Yeah,
so I was really liking my job there. And he said, "You never see a big station like WQED advertising for a producer. You should send a letter and a tape."
Yeah.
So I obviously wasn't desperate for a job. I was really enjoying my job there. And I think that's when, there's no great pressure. And I sort of made a flip letter. And I said my first job was at Horns downtown. And, my parents still lived in Bethel Park. And they sent me a note and said, "Why don't you come visit your parents? We'd like to meet you."
And that's where it was.
That's how it was.
Bethel Park, born and raised.
Well, I was born on the South Side. South Side Hospital.
I guess that makes sense.
But then my younger siblings, we were 4. My younger siblings were born at St. Clair Hospital, but I don't think that was open yet when I was born.
Okay.
So I was born at South Side Hospital, and
now can I ask how old you are?
I'm 66.
66.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and you're an endless encyclopedia of knowledge.
Well, no, I'm just lucky that I have this job.
Yeah.
That has allowed me to, research things and find out things. And I have a reasonably good memory. I wouldn't say I have an incredible memory, but yeah, I love, when a story can come out of all that.
Absolutely.
And actually, sometimes just the search for the story is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to dig into people's lives and like their stories and how things came to be, and that's kind of why I started this podcast. I did one years ago, and it kind of fell apart just because it was before podcasts were around. No one ever listened, and we really didn't have an idea of what we wanted to do. So fast forward 6 years, and I wanted to everyone has their own lane of what they do for their career. And for me, I work and I design piping, but I also have interests in numerous other things. I always use Sarah McAlley. She's actually the brothmonger. She has been on here, and I interviewed her about her being a funeral director. And I've always been interested in something like that, and I've always wanted to know more information about it. So this podcast is basically my way to get all that information and me curate it. So I just talk to anyone that I find interesting about what they do and how they got to that point.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, and I watched your video. It was what was it? The ways that, or what makes Rick tick.
Oh yeah, I didn't make that. That was made about me for my 25th anniversary at QED. Yeah.
Now I saw that, and I loved the first thing that stood out to me was it said that it was a line in there that said, I'll interview anyone. I'll interview anyone in the world, or anyone to talk to them about what they do. And that's kind of how I look at it. I've had anyone from people that work at graveyards to, comedians, Mikey and Big Bob. And it seems to be that everyone's backstory has a incredible way of, navigating through life.
Right.
And you could always find some interesting things through that. Now, and it said, now I kind of have some sort of a background because I've been digging into all your videos, and it said that ever since you were young, you always wanted to kind of be the center of it, and kind of, you always wanted to be a star, or not a star, it's a terrible way to say it, but.
Well, no, yeah. I was always interested in, my mother worked in Little Theater in Bethel Park. She was actually one of the founding members of Stage 62. And so there was all that going on in the background, and I liked that whole scene. And I did a lot of, theater stuff. When I was in high school at Bethel Park, we were lucky. There were enough of us that were sort of interested in that we started a little experimental theater in Bethel Park High School.
Yeah.
Called Theater 400. And we had a really, really great teacher, Paul Moshnick.
Yeah.
Who helped us put that together. And then he directed most of the productions. And it was just really fun. And there were no rules.
Yeah. So that's one thing I never did.
When I was the summer between my junior and senior years in high school, I was a foreign exchange student to Brazil.
Really?
And my brothers in Brazil, my foreign exchange brothers, had a copy of Playboy.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've already mentioned Kurt Vonnegut to you once this morning.
You did.
But in that issue of Playboy, there was a play by Kurt Vonnegut called Fortitude. And I ripped it out of the magazine and brought it home because I thought we could do this at our Theater 400. And we did. It was a story of a woman who, because heart transplants and all these, artificial organs and everything were just beginning to be talked about. And this was about a woman who was totally artificial except for her head. Her head was on a tripod. And we made it work, and we put it together in our little theater in room 400 at Bethel Park High School. So it was really,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was.
And how many people did you have in that? How many people were involved in that?
It changed, and we'd look for things that didn't have too big a cast because it was all done after school. It was all sort of, volunteer, and we had to then try to convince people to stay after school to watch it.
Yeah.
But I remember the biggest production, I think, was at Christmas time. And it was Mr. Moshnick, actually, who started it. He wanted to do something with Dylan Thomas's Under Milkwood.
Dylan Thomas.
As a Welsh poet.
Does he, Bob, I will not go gentle into that great night?
Exactly, into that good night.
Into that good night.
Yeah, do not go gentle into that good night.
I love that.
It's a wonderful, incredible poem. And actually, when I lived in South Carolina, I took several semesters of poetry with James Dickey, the American poet. Yeah. Who wrote Deliverance, that the movie Deliverance was.
Oh, the actual movie?
Yeah. He's in the movie, too. He plays a Southern policeman at the end of the movie.
Oh, wow.
But he's quite a character.
Yeah.
And he was really wonderful. But I remember him talking about that poem, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night, because he said, and he read it to us, and there's the point, it's obviously someone saying, you don't have to die.
Yeah.
He said, but then when you get to the verse where he says, my father, and you realize he's talking to his father.
Yeah.
He said, at that moment, the poem explodes and becomes bigger than the universe. And I just remember him talking about that and that wonderful idea that, wow, this poem gets so powerful because all of a sudden you realize there's a whole nother thing about it. But Dylan Thomas also wrote this play about a town called Under Milkwood. And we did it. And I remember, I think we had like 20 some people in the cast.
Wow. That's really good.
And I remember Mr. Moshnick at the thing. He goes, I can't believe there are enough people that I could convince to come after school and do this, the poetic play. Yeah. But we loved it. And we had a really good time with it. And parts of it are a little saucy for high school, and stuff like that. And we loved that. I remember if there was any sort of like swear word in a book whenever we were reading anything like that, kids would be like, they would emphasize it, shit, damn. Like, and it's like, because we would read passages in class whenever we're going through books and everything. And some of it was like, anytime there was anything like a little vulgar in there, people would highlight it themselves. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So before we get too deep into this, I do an opening segment with every guest that I have, and it's called What's in the Cup? What's in the cup? What's in your cup?
What's in my cup is some really good coffee.
I hand roasted this coffee.
It's really good.
I appreciate that.
It's big. I like a big strong coffee.
Yeah, that's
and it is.
That's how I prefer it. I've never made a medium roast or anything. Usually they're all dark. This is actually a blend of a dark Sumatra and a medium Rwanda. But are you familiar with Black Forge coffee?
Yeah, I am.
So Black Forge, I've had Ashley on here, and whenever they did their Kickstarter, I donated to their platform, and one of them was it was called Beans for Businesses, and it said you get 20 pounds of coffee to label and do whatever you want. So I walked in there and I was like, I'm here to grab the coffee, and he was, and the roaster from his name's Tyler. He's also the roaster at Allegheny Roasters. He was like, oh, you're gonna roast it all right now, and I thought that they were just gonna give me 20 pounds of their coffee. But I kind of dove into it and roasted it all myself. I've been doing it. This is my 4th run. But I'm happy.
So you go there to roast it, or you roast it in your oven?
No. I go there to roast it. They have a very, very extravagant Mill City coffee roaster, and I've been diving into that and learning a little bit more. But this is the Christmas spirit roast. This is what I put out for Christmas. I'm glad you like it, though.
So, how long does it have to roast?
Honestly, if you had to take a guess, what would you guess?
I have no idea.
Exactly my point.
I don't know if you roast coffee for an hour or 2 days. I don't know.
About 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
12 minutes 12 minutes from beginning of putting it in the roaster to bring it out of the bucket. It's around 12 minutes.
And does it roll around? We see those coffee roasters that
there's a huge drum in there, and the drum. You turn on the coffee roaster and you get the drum heated up to like 490 degrees, and inside it's in there just rotating, and then you put the beans in the top, and as it's rotating with that high heat, the beans are bouncing off the side, and they're bouncing off so aggressively that it's forcing the energy inside the bean, so it gets like an even roast. And as time goes on, you bring the temperatures down a little bit, you turn the air up a little bit, so it gets a little bit more air fluctuation in there, and then you kind of just it looks very bizarre. They got a laptop hooked up to it. You could see grids and everything like that, but it's addicting to learn about. I like getting in and getting my hands dirty and trying to learn about things, but they do good stuff down there. It's a very interesting process, but as you said, I thought it would be like a day, hours.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I thought it would just be like a bunch of coffee on like sheets,
But you know what? No, I say that, but then if I think about it, you can buy machines that actually you can put the raw beans in and it'll roast it, because everybody says that immediately roasted coffee tastes so much better.
Yeah.
The closer you can get to just roasting the beans, grinding them, making the coffee, that coffee is the best.
Absolutely. It is. It's fresh. I enjoy it though.
And I guess maybe when they make espresso in one of those Italian espresso machines, they grind it right then.
Yeah.
I don't know that they roast it right then.
It's a whole It's a whole weird process. Talking to Tyler, who kind of instructed me. He's kind of like the coffee mentor. He gets down to the point where he has a automated kettle that goes to a certain degree, and he measures his coffee out in grams and perfect increments, and you can get as crazy as you want to it, just like anything else. But I'm a coffee fan. So, but anyway, I really appreciate you coming over and speaking with me, and I'm glad we were able to link this up. I saw you're a fan of the Brothmonger.
I am.
I saw that the other day, and I was like, I think it's time to hit. I think it's time to hit him up and see if he's available to talk to me. And here we are. So you went to Bethel Park. Now, whenever you were younger, were you like a history buff? Were you like someone who liked to read and kind of learn about things?
I was always a reader. No,
Yeah.
I would never have identified myself as a history buff. And even when I started this job, I remember that I've always just been interested, I think, in stories. So and that interest in stories led me to read a lot. And then when I started to put together little documentaries, I was always interested in how things started.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, more than anything else. And then when I was working at QED, and I had already done Kennywood Memories and the Mon, the Al, and the O, and I think, and a couple of other shorter things. And we heard about in Los Angeles, the public television station was doing a thing called the Los Angeles History Project.
Oh, yeah.
And my boss said, "You always have history in your shows. We should start calling your things the Pittsburgh History Series." And because of that, I think I got this, I became known as a historian.
Yeah.
Because it was called the Pittsburgh History Series. And actually, I use that sort of as my branding. At the beginning of all my shows, I say this is part of the Pittsburgh History Series.
That's very interesting. Now, whenever you, as a producer, like, would you say that's your title, a producer right now at WQED?
Yeah, that's what I am. I'm a producer. Sometimes I'll say producer, narrator.
Yeah.
Producer, narrator, writer.
Now, as a producer, like, what are your duties as a producer? I feel like it's a very broad term.
Oh, it is. And, but I think, when you look at, like, in films, the director's in charge of the project.
Yeah.
And the producer in a film is usually just the money guy.
Yeah.
In television, the producer is the guiding intelligence behind a project. The executive producer is usually the person who's, been in charge of the money and all of that. So, I'm responsible. Well, now, when I first came to QED, I was assigned things. Now, usually they were my ideas and, what we can develop and where we can find some money, some backing.
Yeah.
And all of that. And then from there on, I do the research. I figure out, if we're going to go places, where are we going to go? Who are we going to talk to?
That's great.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so, and we've had some incredible opportunities.
Absolutely. Because
we started, doing the Pittsburgh History Series, and that was so popular here. We would always send them to PBS in D.C., and say, would you consider a national airing? And they would always say, it's too local, too parochial.
Yeah.
And then we did Pennsylvania Diners, which was a statewide show.
Yeah.
That was funded by an organization that doesn't exist anymore called PPTN, the Pennsylvania Public Television Network. They gave us the money for that. And we sent that to PBS, and they said, you know what? It doesn't matter if you don't know these specific restaurants. Everybody knows this kind of restaurant.
Yeah.
And actually, the original Diners, if you get the DVD, it's a 90-minute show. They said, cut it down to an hour, and we'll put it on nationally.
Really?
And so that's what we did.
Wow.
And it was in the era of when people clicked through these channels.
Yeah, and they didn't know what was going on, what was on TV at that time.
Yeah, well, you could look it up, but most people just sat down and would go through. And we got phenomenal ratings for the Diner show. It was really, really popular, and I think it sort of surprised PBS. And at that point, they said, well, that seemed to work. If you could do any national shows, what would you do? Make us a list of 10 shows. And so we started to do national shows as well as the Pittsburgh History Series.
Wow.
And so the first two we did were Ice Cream and Sure Things. And my list was like that. I do a show about ice cream. We eventually, I think, did all 10 of them.
Yeah, you did the hot dog one too as well, right?
Hot dogs, that came next. We was ice cream and Sure Things, which I could say are non-environmental reasons why people like to go to the beach.
Yeah.
Then hot dogs and amusement parks, called Great Old Amusement Parks.
Okay.
And then, since then we've done cemeteries and flea markets and food markets. And
I love that.
Pies and bakeries and the Lincoln Highway, which I love doing that show. That was really great.
Yeah. So. Now, could I rewind you a little bit here?
Yes.
Now, in school, I talk about this all the time, it seems like, because I usually go back to that, to people coming up in high school, because I think it's outrageous that we as people should have to choose what we want to do for the rest of our lives starting at 15. And I just talked to a professional wedding cake decorator last week, and he was someone who's known what he wanted to do since he was 10 years old. And I am someone who I had no idea what I wanted forever. So anytime talking to someone who kind of had like an idea of what they wanted to do with their life, I always love hearing about it because I'd never had that experience. So as you're in school and you're making your way up to that graduation day, and you obviously have to figure out what you want to do after, did you have an idea of where you wanted to be?
No, I had no idea.
No idea.
No, beyond the fact that I knew that, I like to read. I thought maybe, but I also, when I was in high school, I loved to draw. I thought maybe I might be a cartoonist.
Oh, wow.
And I actually did some cartooning when I was in college for the Daily Tar Heel at UNC.
Oh, yeah.
I would do occasional sort of like political cartoons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. And I always said that I had no idea where I would end up. And I knew that I had leanings towards all those things.
Absolutely.
But when I went to Chapel Hill, I thought I would be a double major in English and theater.
English and theater.
I started as a theater student.
What took you down there?
Literally, I was reading Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe when it was time to apply to schools. And he describes going to school at Chapel Hill. It's called Pulpit Hill in that book. But I thought, this sounds great. And so I loved what he wrote about the library and all that. So
was it accurate?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chapel Hill is a pretty enchanting place. It's a great little college town, in the middle of, a pretty conservative state. It's a bastion of liberalism and,
I'm sure,
intellectual thought and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a really great place. I still have fond memories of Chapel Hill.
Now, you just came back from a vacation?
Well, yeah. Oddly, just by, weird coincidence and other factors, my sister moved to North Carolina 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Near the beach, which I've always wanted to know somebody that lived near the beach.
Can't beat that.
No, I said, because you don't even have to be nice to your sister.
Obligated to be down there. Hi, how are you?
No, you don't. You don't have to be nice to your sister.
Sleeping at your house for a couple of days.
Exactly, for a couple of weeks. So, but it's, I went along as I learned as I went along. And as a theater student, we had to be part of a television workshop on weekends in Raleigh. They would bus us over. And, you had to be like, sometimes you didn't know what you'd do when you left on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
You could be a newscaster. You could be somebody in like a little drama or something. It was a workshop for television students. And I thought the guy that was teaching that was so good. And I said, I really want to take a class with him.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you have to declare a major in television in order to take his classes. And I said, that's okay. I'll drop this theater major and take that.
Wow.
And so I did. And so then I never turned her back. And, so then people started to think, I'm interested in television. And then I was lucky enough to get a fellowship. They have a program at UNC called the North Carolina Fellows. And what they do is they help you pay for summer internships.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's definitely cool.
And so one summer I worked in Raleigh for the Blue Cross Blue Shield program. That wasn't, that was my first summer. I just didn't have any time to set up a thing, and they had some that were available, various opportunities. So I did that. But then because I was interested in television, for the next summer, would have been the summer after my sophomore year in Chapel Hill, I found that Josie Carey, who used to do a children's show here in Pittsburgh, which I remembered from when I was growing up.
Was it We?
Well, that's the show she was doing in South Carolina.
Okay.
We.
Okay, yeah.
WHEEE.
I remember her popping up over every letter. We.
Right. And actually she wrote that song with Joe Negri.
Oh, wow.
Because she knew Pittsburgh, and I mean, she's from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
She was from Pittsburgh. And so I worked on We for that summer as a summer intern and really loved it. And things might have been very different if I hadn't set up already that I was going away for my junior year abroad in France.
Yeah. Now, what took you over there?
When I was in grade school at St. Valentine's in Bethel Park, there was a kid in my class, Randy Larkin, whose mother was a French war bride.
Oh, yeah.
From World War II. She had married an American soldier and then came to America. And she thought if she taught kids how to speak French, it would make her English better.
Oh, wow.
And so starting in second grade, once a week, Mrs. Larkin came and taught us French. So I developed a love for French real early on. And so I knew that eventually I would try to get to France.
That's awesome.
And so I did my junior year abroad in Lyon, which was, it was a really interesting city to be in for a year because it's not like a big tourist town or anything like that. It's a big city in France, sometimes called the second biggest city. Lyon and Marseille compete to be the second largest city in France.
Wow.
But Lyon is very Pittsburghy.
Yeah.
The Rhone and Saône rivers come together. It has much the same geography. There's a big big hill beside the one river with a church on top. And
wow.
I loved all the parallels with Pittsburgh.
And you were over there for how long?
For a year.
A year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's really awesome. I've never been out of the country yet.
So no, I loved that. And then I continued to work in television when I came back. When I came back, Josie had me back to do more shows with We.
Yeah.
To talk about my travels and to show postcards and things like that. She talked to puppets, just as she had done on Children's Corner with Fred Rogers and all of that. So when I got the job at QED, Fred said something to me about, we've both done puppets with Josie.
Yeah. It's a unique, it was a unique show. Everything from what I remember it, I'm 29, I definitely remember Mr. Rogers, and I definitely remember watching it as a younger kid, but I feel like that a lot of it was me too young to remember the beginning of it. My brother's 35. I think that he's more of an age to be able to get a broad range of it. Because I was thinking about that yesterday. Do I remember as much of Mr. Rogers as I would like to? And I don't know if I do remember it as much. I remember the puppets, and I remember the broad ideas of it, and I remember certain parts. I'll never forget Mr. Rogers was going over to a fish tank, and he would feed the fish, and he would say, "I'm feeding the fish right now." And it was I heard the backstory of why he does that, and it was a young girl who was blind wrote into him and said, do you remember to feed the fish? And he said it every time on there, so that girl would know that he was feeding it, and makes my heart melt every time I even think about that.
Oh, that's a good story. I don't know that story.
Yeah, it was great. It was one of them things you see on Facebook that came up, and you're just like, geez, that's really awesome.
Right.
Definitely cool. Now, do you think that children's television, I feel like that time frame that ship has sailed. Do you think so?
Well, I know that kids don't sit in front of the TV the way they used to.
And that's what I'm talking about. It's you usually see kids with a cell phone or an iPad.
Right.
And I don't know if I know any young children, my friends are having kids. I don't know if I know any young kids that just sit there and watch TV anymore. It's either an iPad or some YouTube cartoons or...
Well, but the thing I think, and this has always been true for public television, is some kids don't have those resources.
That's a good point.
And they usually do have a TV.
That's a good point.
And so, I mean, I think, I think TV can still be a good babysitter. Times when, parents need time to make dinner and stuff like that. And you can put the kids in front of a show. And
Absolutely.
There's no question, like the show that, grew out of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that's on now, Daniel Stripe at Tiger's Neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's animated, but kids watch that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, there's various avenues, and even at QED now, we have a separate channel. QED 5 is children's shows all day, 24 hours a day.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So, and I think they get people to, kids that wake up in the middle of the night and their parents want, to
That's a good point.
keep them quiet and
be able to put that on. That's a
put
really
them
good
on
point.
24 hours a day. So,
So when you came back here and you're working at WQED, like, were you? I mean, you already have a base. Honestly, I mean, you already have a base, obviously, because you were working down there in public television. Now, whenever you come up here, do you have like a set idea of like what's going on, or is it kind of like, let's come up with some good ideas that we can market to people?
well, I think that at the time, which was I came here in 1987, and QED at the time was a big national producer. We produced the National Geographic specials.
Really?
We did a ton of important science programming. We did Planet Earth, all kinds of really big buck, high end public television programs. And they always claimed to have also wonderful local programming, but they felt that that was often an empty brag.
Yeah.
And they had hired a woman from San Francisco to try and pump up the local programming. And she's the person who put the ad in Broadcasting Magazine, which I answered.
Okay.
And she eventually hired me. And they were trying to make local programming more important to QED.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what it would be, but I was doing local programming in South Carolina and doing documentaries, and they liked that idea. And so when I came for my job interview, I know that I had done a documentary in South Carolina about the state dance, which is the shag.
I saw that.
Okay, and which is a sort of a slow jitterbug swing dance. And she said to me, "We'll have to find something for you to do like shag here." And I said, "Well, I've always thought it would be good to do a documentary about Kennywood." I said that at my job interview, and I remember her saying, "Ooh, that amusement park."
Really?
Well, she's from San Francisco. She had never been to Kennywood,
I guess,
she had heard the name, I guess, and I said, "Yeah, no, I think it's really important to people that grow up here. Kennywood is a big thing." And I mean, to her, credit, she said the next summer, I started in 87, in 88, she said, "Why don't you, see about that Kennywood thing you wanted to do?" And so, that's when we made Kennywood Memories.
When did Kennywood open?
Kennywood opens in 1898 or 1899. You see both years.
Yeah, it's crazy how long it's been there.
Right. Well, before that, it was like a place that people went called Kenny's Grove.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. And actually, Brian Butko down at the History Center has done a lot of stuff with the history of Kennywood. And he actually claims that he thinks Kenny's Grove was kind of a rough place.
A rough place?
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of fights and a lot of drinking and that kind of thing. But then it's the Monongahela Street Railway Company, the streetcar company that starts it, as an attraction. They buy the land from the Kenny family to build an attraction there, like a park.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an amusement park at first, but then they do get a merry-go-round and then things start to build. So it's it was to be a place where people would want to go on the weekends and use the streetcar when they weren't going to work.
Yeah.
And,
Now, Kennywood, for you to say that in your job interview, did you have like a strong tie to that? No?
Nope. It was just my memories from, how important it was and, how at some point you ask a girl to go with you.
Absolutely.
And all of that. And it was,
Yeah, thinking about that, Kennywood is like a very, very pivotal thing in a lot of lives. You got the Kennywood picnic. That's what you do in the summertime. And now they implemented like Fright Nights, and I actually proposed to my wife at Kennywood.
Excellent.
Yeah.
No, yeah. It's a big place. It's and I mean, as I said, to me, it was a once a year thing.
Yeah.
Although I also know that every year there would be. I mean, when I was going as a kid, it was the era of tickets. You bought tickets at school, and then you would take them with you to Kennywood, ride tickets and food tickets. And
you would buy that at school, rides and food and all that.
You'd buy that like the week before you went to Kennywood. You'd buy those at school because they were school picnic tickets.
Yeah.
And I think they were cheaper than the tickets you'd buy at Kennywood.
Yeah.
And there would always be leftover tickets, and my mom would take us one day late in the summer, usually in a week in August sometime.
Yeah,
we would go back and have a little short day at Kennywood to use up the tickets. That were
the remainder of it. I remember that as a kid. I remember we had tickets that we were able to buy from school, but it was only just like admittance tickets. But my mom, I remember whenever they were significantly discounted, so my mom would always buy like a handful of them, and we would always have some left over. They would just be on our cork board, and anytime if we wanted to go with our friends or anything, you just go. It was just like a time filler, and it's a place to go and have fun. I loved it. Like Kennywood was a huge thing for me. My parents would always take us there, and we would get a Kennywood outfit, the Kennywood outfit, and you go there, and I would just spend all my parents' money on games to win a stuffed animal, and it has a lot of memories in my. That's why I proposed to my wife there. She also loved Kennywood more than anything, and Nick Paradise, who is the media guy there now, I talked to him, and I was like, hey man, I would love to propose to my wife there. He gave me that big stage right behind. Right where they do all the things, because it was for Fright Night. I did it at Fright Night, and he was like, yeah, man, anything you need. Let me come in early that day and like set everything up. And it's just a really great place. And now all the memories that I did have on there, or have there throughout the years, that's just one big monumental one. That's a cherry on top of it all. It's interesting though. Kennywood's an interesting place.
For sure.
Do you go there now still?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't, I don't have the urge like I used to, but I usually get there at least once a year. And I do love the Christmas lights thing too. And I usually make it for that for sure. Although, and then early on in that whole process, they invited me to come out and read the night before Christmas.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I did that. I've done it many years. The last 2 years I've been rained out. That's the chance you take.
Really?
Yeah, if they cancel because of inclement weather,
yeah,
they've set up a schedule of all the people that are going to read the night before Christmas.
Okay.
But I did it for probably 5 or 6 years before I thought, you know what, the night before Christmas, A Visit from St. Nicholas, that's its official name by Clement Moore, which is also controversial. He may not have written the poem, but it's probably the most famous poem in the English language. More people know that poem than any other.
Really?
So I thought.
And you said it wasn't called The Night Before Christmas? What was it called?
It's called A Visit from St. Nicholas.
A Visit from St. Nicholas.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
I mean, the first line is "'Twas the night before Christmas."
Yeah.
But the official name of the poem is Visit from St. Nicholas. And I decided I shouldn't just know this. So I took it on to not read it, but recite it.
Yeah.
So, and I still do that. And now I've done it many years with the red beans and rice combo over at the Elks on the north side.
Red beans and rice what is that?
It's a little jazz combo.
Oh, yeah.
And they do a lot of New Orleans music, but they invite me every year to come to their Christmas concert and recite "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and they provide a musical background.
That's so awesome.
It is awesome. And
yeah,
they're really
that's
great.
Really cool.
Tom Roberts, who's their piano player, he wrote all the music for the Nebby series.
Oh yeah.
He's Chris Fenimore, who's our cook on WQED, does the QED Cooks shows and all of that. He plays with the banjo club. He's been a banjo player all his life. And he was walking by, and I said, I need to find somebody to do music. I don't have a lot of money. And he goes, call Tom Roberts. I think he might be interested in that. I didn't know Tom, and I said, I don't have a lot of money, for this. I don't have it budgeted, but I'd rather use some real music rather than needle drop stuff that we have in our library here. And he goes, I give it a shot. So I had enough money. We paid him for 2 or 3 of the Nebby shows, and then we just reused what he had written for those shows for the rest of them.
Now, where did that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that
Now, where did that idea of the Nebby series come from? Like, you did the Kickstarter, and
well, I mean, it was because we were trying to figure out some new ways to raise money. For my local shows. I mean, there's no question that my whole set of programs about Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh History Series, have been funded largely by the Buell Foundation.
Yeah.
And for some years they totally funded the programs, but then they said, we've been doing this for a while. You should try to be finding other monies too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think which is sort of standard procedure with foundations and things. They try to get you going and
absolutely
and hope that you will, So we were trying to think of other ways to raise some local funds, and the whole idea of Kickstarters were new and all of that, and so we decided, why don't we try that? And I remember we were having meetings about it. Let's try to do a thing for Rick's next set of shows and all that. And then I went to the, I Made It Fair, I think it's called, down at the Market, down at the convention center.
Yep.
And a woman there had buttons, and one of them was a little yellow button that said Nebby. And I thought, that is really, I said, and I bought some of her little yellow Nebby buttons, which I really liked. And I thought, and it was at the time we were doing all this talking, and I thought, what if we called this series Nebby? Because it would brand it as sort of Pittsburgh, but it,
Is Nebby a Pittsburgh term?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, red up your room.
Yeah, red up your room. That's my go-to when people say.
Actually, and I thought if we tried to do this again, I might want to call the thing Redding Up, or red up your,
gum bands,
red
Trip
it up.
Tam.
Gum bands is good too.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but the fact that anybody who does this sort of work, including what you're doing now, it's Nebby.
Yeah, it is. I'm nebbing into people's lives.
Exactly.
100%.
So, and I mean, in the good and the bad sense of that, it's a curiosity, Nebby.
Yeah, that's how I always say. I'm a curious person. That's all it is. I'm a curious person.
So, and I threw that out as an idea at one of these meetings, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's good." And so then we developed the whole thing. Then when we knew that before we started the Kickstarter, that it would be called Nebby. And then actually Dave Hallowell, who does a lot of our social media work and really does most of our social media work, came up with the idea of the Rick Starter, Kickstarter, Rick Starter. And so we used that too, and Nebby, and it all worked out. And it's I wouldn't mind trying it again.
Yeah,
but I remember how tense it was,
because
you have to, if you do it as a Kickstarter, you have to make the goal.
Yeah, or it doesn't happen.
Or you get no money. So we had set the goal at $113,000, which several people thought was like way too high.
But it surpassed that pretty easily, right?
Well, not easily, but you get 30 days to do it, and I bet we were 20 some days in before we hit the goal.
Okay.
And then we said if we get to 130,000, we'll do 7 programs instead of 6.
Yeah.
And then we made that. We actually ended up making 141,000, I think.
Wow.
So
that's really great.
Yeah, so I ended up doing 8 programs actually. But after because I fell and I ruptured my quadricep tendon, I wasn't quite as mobile and I was out of commission for a while. So Nebby has lasted longer than we thought it would.
Absolutely.
And I ended up doing more. I did 2 shows on Kennywood using footage that we had shot back in 1988. One called That Kennywood Summer, and then I did one called Don't Stand Up, because so many people had liked that, and I thought, well, all that material is in the computer system at work and able to be edited. Let's do another one. And it was not hard to come up with another half hour's worth of unseen material. I mean, and so, I mean, the Nebby things turned out to be not exactly what I imagined they would be when we started. but we've done 8 shows now, and I like them all.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. Like, how do you choose the topics of what you want?
by hook and by crook, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Whatever I think I can tolerate spending a couple of months working on.
Yeah, because now to take the footage and to get the information and to do the research, like what is an episode? What does an episode consist of time wise and research wise? Like, does it take a month to do?
It takes a couple of months, I would think, and they're all half hours.
Yeah.
And most of the shows in the Pittsburgh History Series are hours. I mean, starting with the Mon, the Al, and the O, and Kennywood Memories, and Holy Pittsburgh. They're all hour-long programs. Some of them went to 90. I think Pittsburgh A to Z is a 90. And sometimes they don't have a set time. And then we would make a shortened version that's easy to schedule, put in the schedule.
Yeah.
But like if it was just going to be used for a pledge or something, we would leave it at its odd length. Always totally deadline driven. I don't finish them early. I always think it's funny because I say at some point we have to make a promo. And once that promo starts airing, people think the program is ready. Well, it never is.
Yeah.
No, the promo is done. The program isn't done, but the just little commercial for the show is done. And those bigger shows used to take about 6 months at least.
Yeah.
But these half-hour Nebbies, I would say, 1 to 2 months. And like they're very different. The ones the early Nebbies, like a short history of Route 88, and Meet Pittsburgh, and people who've written books around here. Those were all shot. So we would have a shooting schedule, and then we'd have to come back and edit that together. And then, what's the fourth one? I'm just drawing a blank in my head. But anyway, and then we do the 2 Kennywoods after my accident. I was actually starting because QED had said, you're spending too much time on, too much money on the camera work and all of that. What can you do that would be a little bit more economical? And I said, I've always wanted to go back to that Kennywood footage. So I had actually started that before I had the accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was going to be the next one. In fact, it was on the schedule to be in September, but I was in the hospital in September.
Yeah, and that just so you said that happened in August.
Yeah, at the end of August in 2018.
You fell down some steps.
I just fell one step. I missed the bottom step. So
carrying some Pellegrino.
Yep. Carrying an old case. It was 7 years old. It was. I said it was so old. It was still in glass bottles with caps. Now all the San Pellegrinos in plastic with a screw-off cap. But I mean, that's another story. Finding this unexpected case of San Pellegrino water. But I just missed that one thing. But the doctor said that I must have. There's a way that you can fall. I just sort of fell forward. It was not dramatic. It was not a big. I just fell forward. But he said there's a way you can in trying to extend your leg and pull back at the same time, and I ruptured this tendon, which meant that my tendon was,
off.
Yeah, it was not healthy.
Yeah,
that allowed it to rupture.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
But when I was down on the ground, I just thought I was going to get up, and then I thought I can't move my leg.
Oh, wow!
And of course, I thought I'm paralyzed.
Yeah. Immediately think of the worst thing.
I can remember, when I got into an ambulance, I realized I could move my feet back and forth.
That's good then.
And I thought whoa,
yeah,
maybe I'm not.
I loved that video, even though it was much to your pain, but it was fun.
But you know what? Pain was not a factor, which is I think a big factor in all of that.
That's what you said. You said that surprisingly after the first day you didn't have too much pain.
Well, I mean, I had pain from the surgery because they cut my leg open to repair this. But
was it 50-some staples?
Yeah, 55, I think. Yes,
it was, and it looked like a pretty.
Oh, it was a big scar.
Yeah,
it still is a big scar.
Pretty gruesome mark on your leg.
I mean, no, but I think beautifully done. I mean, it's healed really. It always was perfect as far as that was concerned. But it just an unexpected fall, but because your tendon doesn't have any nerves in it, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So I was awkward. I was in a weird situation. I couldn't bend my knee. I couldn't put weight on my left leg, but I was not hurting.
That's good then.
You know, when sitting there in the hospital
The
hospital room, I was not in pain.
Yeah, that was I did enjoy that video, and I think that is a perfect guide for, you know, just an idea of some of the great places around the city that you can go eat.
Well,
you know?
but it also, I mean, and I say this in the show, that, you know, it made me realize that, you know, I've not been a great person to go visit people in the hospital and stuff.
I heard you say
that. Really appreciated, you know. It makes the days go faster, and
absolutely,
you know.
Me and my wife thought about that too. We were like, because you said you were like, you know, now that I see all these people bringing in things for me, I realized that I've never done that for anyone, and I was like, you know what, I've never done that either.
Yeah, to take food to somebody in the hospital just seems weird.
Yeah,
but so many people did it, and you know, I appreciated it so much.
Yeah,
and then also the garden that they have there in that hospital.
I didn't know that at all. I did not know that there was a garden down there, and
with organic herbs that I could go down in my wheelchair. And
yeah, I saw you picking them up and putting them in your pocket, dressing up the hospital food.
The nurses would always say, "Do you have that basil cologne on again?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I've been down to the garden."
That's cool, though. You seem to. I mean, obviously, over the years, you have a really, really great roster of great people that you're fortunate enough to be friends with. I mean,
well, and I think part of it is the fact that, well, I mean, as I said at the beginning, longevity is a big factor. I think Pittsburghers love longevity.
Yeah,
and part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that we know that, you know, market research has said that there's a lot of Pittsburghers are native born. In other words, people that are born here tend to stay here.
Yeah.
And even ones that go away, you always hear about that boomerang effect that people want to get back. I was not one of those people who desperately wanted to get back to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But when I got back, I just thought, you know what, this city is a lot more interesting and, you know, historically important than I think I got the impression when I was growing up here.
Yeah.
You know, as the 19th century became the 20th century, Pittsburgh was like a world capital. And I think we tend to forget that now because we don't have that status anymore. But because of that, there was so much money here and so much industry and, you know, not just steel, but glass. And even before that, you know, the whole fur trade. And there's so much interesting stuff about Pittsburgh that I've sort of thrived on that. And Pittsburghers do love the fact that, I mean, we love... On our news, we like the newscasters to stick around for a long time.
Absolutely.
You know, so we like those
consistency.
Yes.
You know, it was, you know, my memories of the news is you turn on the news and Sally Wiggin is there.
I was just about to mention, like, Sally Wiggin is a perfect example. She's been around for
36 years. I think she was in she was a newscaster 36 years. And I think about that. I've been emailing with her back and forth trying to set up an interview with her because I think it would be fantastic to just talk about, you know, the process of that, for her being a woman in the industry, 36 years in there. And like, that's like a staple to me. Like whenever I think of the news in the city, I think of her.
Right.
I think of Sally Wiggin. And I think that says a lot. And what you say about consistency is true. You know, people like they like consistency and they like the comfort of like knowing, of being of normalcy almost. It's like it's normal to see that, and it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. Did you want another cup of coffee?
Well, I wouldn't complain about that.
This is how easy it is. Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem.
How long have we been talking?
An hour.
Are we done?
You're all right with going for a little bit longer.
Let's go a little longer. I always say that my favorite podcast that I've ever been on, and this guy moved to Pittsburgh. His name is Boaz Frankel.
Boaz Frankel.
Yeah, he contacted me because of my show Sandwiches That You Will Like.
Yeah.
And he did a sandwich podcast out of Amsterdam.
Wow.
And called My Favorite Sandwich. And he said, would you do, but his podcast is a minute long. You have to do it under a minute.
In under a minute?
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
that's a lot of pressure, I feel.
I know, but they're really easy to listen to.
It is easy to listen to. And
a minute, anybody can listen to a minute podcast.
And that's a good point. My ever since I've started, you know, there's people that so I'm a very, very big podcast consumer. You know, I started through, you know, Joe Rogan is?
I know that name.
Joe Rogan was the host of Fear Factor.
Okay.
He is a UFC announcer, but he is also one of the godfathers of podcasting. He does long form podcasts with people because obviously, you know, for me, a perfect example, I didn't know too much about you. I go on YouTube, I look up what you got, and I watch some things, and you know, you get the Spark Notes version. You get the edited down Spark Notes version where, you know, that's just the answer and then that's it. My podcast has always been a little bit long formed, and I kind of dive deep into a little bit. And they're all over an hour and a half around there, and people seem to enjoy it. And I feel like that was my goal as the podcast. Like, I want to be the person that is able to provide a platform for someone that wants to learn about a certain individual. And I have people on that are, you know, not public figures. I have people just regular. My wife, my mother has been on, and some of those podcasts are some of my highest reviewed ones.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People just like to learn about things a little bit more. But back to what you were talking about, the sandwich podcast, you said it was a minute long. I think that's a lot of pressure for me. I feel like I wouldn't know what to do. Now,
I mean, can you think of what is your favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich,
It's hard.
it is hard. It is hard. As far as in the city, if I would have to pick one sandwich to have over and over and over again, it would either be the Philly cheesesteak from Streets on Carson, and it's not even because I'm sponsored. I love that, or I would have to go with a DeCarlo's hoagie.
Oh.
Are you familiar with DeCarlo's hoagies in Elizabeth? I grew up in Elizabeth, so like that holds a nostalgic factor in my heart, and I love.
I think the outside their place it says "Home of the Hoagie."
Home of the hoagie.
Is that possible?
I don't think that this is the right place that we're thinking of. There's more than one DeCarlo's, but this is like a little fruit market.
Yeah, we're thinking of the same place.
Then it probably is that. Right across from the Frosty Cone ice cream place.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I don't know the last time that I looked at the front of their building, but that's probably my favorite.
No, because I at that time, I mean, when I went down there, I was writing the back page of Pittsburgh Magazine.
Yeah,
and I wanted to do a thing about sandwiches, and I had seen that Home of the Hoagie, and I thought, do they really claim to be the home of the hoagie?
Well, their hoagies are pretty insane. It's a whole loaf of bread.
No, it was great. I went, and yeah, exactly, and they were really good, You know, I did a whole bunch of sandwiches around, but they were sort of the centerpiece of that story that I did.
Now, have you always been a foodie?
Yeah, I would guess so. You know, but I think my father was a big enthusiastic eater.
I saw that.
My mother, you know, my mother was an adventuresome eater.
Yeah,
but she wasn't an enthusiastic eater like my dad.
Yeah. It said that in that video, it said that you got a lot of your any writing ability that you have comes from your mother, but any food and things like that is for your father. But I tend to see an ongoing theme with food in a lot of your work.
No question, because I think it's so important.
Absolutely, it is.
And actually. I remember when I was in college, I read a lot of W.H. Auden, and he said one of his things was we should not put up statues to military men, but to chefs.
Wow.
Because they really influence our lives. And he also wrote something about, if someone doesn't care about food, how can they care about anything else? So
wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
The stuff that you put into your body is what is most important. So,
I'm a foodie as well. I mean, I enjoy it. That's.
I know sometimes people say like assume. I mean, I do like beer and I like drinks and all that, but I say but drinks are not my passion. Food is my passion.
It's great because everyone. It's. I mean, it's almost like it's a different history and a piece of consumable. It's a consumable piece of artwork, an edible piece of artwork that is different anywhere you go. You can taste different things, different characteristics of it, and that's what I enjoy about it all.
Oh yeah,
I was never a picky eater though. Were you?
No.
Well,
Probably more so as a kid, I was a picky eater, but now, and I say the only thing that I'm somewhat skeptical about eating now is rutabaga.
Rutabaga.
My mom made rutabaga a lot when we were kids, and I never liked it.
I don't know if I've ever had it.
You know, it's like a turnip. It's
Yeah.
and she would make it and she would mash it. It looked like orange mashed potatoes. But it's a very strong flavor.
Are you a fan of kohlrabi's?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, see, that was one thing that I think that was the most bizarre thing that I loved back whenever I was younger was raw kohlrabi's. We would grow them in our garden. My dad would slice them up with a little salt and pepper, and it was almost like a more of a tart apple.
Right.
But I enjoyed that. Is there anything now rutabaga? Is there anything that you will not eat now?
No.
Yeah.
No, I can't think of anything.
Do you even?
I'm not crazy about dill.
Dill.
Dill, the
Wow.
herb.
Yeah.
I mean, I love dill pickles.
Yeah.
And a little bit of dill is fine, but I find often that somebody's put dill in something they've put too much. Dill and tarragon are the two things that I don't want a lot of.
Yeah.
I can take a little bit, but those are just two flavors. And I know some people can't stand cilantro, but I love cilantro.
Yeah, I do. I do enjoy it very much. Usually, sometimes the only thing the other day that I just turned away was we ate some guacamole somewhere, and there was an insane amount of garlic in there. It was too much. It was almost like burning my mouth how much garlic was in there.
Wow.
But my wife loved it, so it obviously wasn't too bad. But
I do like spicy things, and I just before Christmas, a couple years ago, I can't remember why I started doing this, but I make chocolate chip cookies, and at the very end, I find that it's once they're out of the oven, right when they come out of the oven, if I sprinkle like kosher salt on top.
Oh yeah,
it's really good. That sweet and sour thing.
It's fantastic.
And first down in the strip, I saw the Pittsburgh Salt Company.
Yep.
And they had flake salt, which was even better because it looks like snow almost. And so now they have a storefront over in Millvale. And I went over there to get some salt. And I noticed that they had these spicy salts.
Oh, yeah.
One called scorpion salt, and then another called ghost pepper. Well, I know that ghost peppers are I love spicy food, but ghost pepper is another
it's a little too much
thing. And she said scorpion is a step down from that, but it's still very spicy. But I used it all during Christmas and everything. I would just have it at the table. My sister and her man Bill, they didn't want that spicy stuff, so I would just put a little of that salt on things, and it really livens up everything. So.
Absolutely. There's are you familiar with Paul Family Farms? They are a maple syrup farm.
Oh, I do. I know that guy. I've met him several times.
Travis.
Yes.
He is fantastic. I had him on here, and he brought me over a little care package of his Wiggle Whiskey aged maple syrup, and they have a collaboration with the salt company called Maple Jalapeno Salt, and it's fantastic.
Huh.
And it's crazy because we just went to Seattle and Portland, and it's weird because there's so many different. There's a store for everything now. They have a salt store out there that's just all salt, and you could get black truffle salt, you can get spicy salt, you can get whatever you want. And it's interesting because I feel like that stuff.
That just sounds like the place in Millville.
Yeah,
it's all salt.
It's all salt, and it's weird because I feel like that these are newer things. Maybe I just wasn't aware of them back then. I see that now. I'm getting a little bit older. I'm getting a little bit more conscious of the surroundings that I'm in. And whenever I was younger, I just never cared about anything. I never cared about learning about things. I never knew a lot of the history of Pittsburgh. I never I took advantage, or I neglected. I neglected where we were. We're in such a great place, and we have so many great people around this city, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this podcast.
But I don't think that's so unusual because
it's definitely not.
I always say that, I think sometimes learning about history is wasted on the young because they don't care yet.
Absolutely.
But as you get older, you want to know more and more history.
Absolutely.
And that's not only local history and national history, but family history even. There comes a time when you think I want to know about my grandparents and great-grandparents. And when did people come here and how did we get here and all of that. And, it may be sometime in your 20s or, as you start to get a little older, I think you want to know more about, how things started and what the history was. So
You're right, though. It is. It's wasted on the young because, I would say
you don't care.
Yeah, you don't care at all. You're just in school serving time.
But I also think there's a problem with history, and certainly as I was taught history in grade school and junior high and senior high and all that. It's a military governmental history that you learn.
Yeah.
And really, history is the history of everything.
Yeah.
And that's why, history is the history of amusement parks and restaurants and, all of that, and I think all of that's important. And if history were taught more like that, more kids might get interested earlier on.
Absolutely.
But when you realize that history isn't just military and governmental and all of that, political history. It's everything. Everything has a history.
I agree with that, and I find it now. It's super interesting. Let me ask you: are you familiar with a person named Dean Bogg? Dean Bogg is a filmmaker that is just making a stir in the city. He started doing these documentaries called Neighborhoods, and I feel like I started watching all these videos he does, and I feel that the way that he does them appeals to a broader range of people. Like it's not as like stuffy and as like formal and I don't know what word to describe it, but like he'll swear and do whatever, but like stuff like that I feel like is more it's more sought out now. It's like people, like you said, people want to learn more about things. People want to like go around. You see people like reading up. You see people reading about like the town that they're in. There's people that are more conscious of like doing better for their town, where they're living, and what they do. And I feel like that. I feel like he does a good job with it. I feel like that. I watch all your stuff, and I swear I learn more about the city just in one video than my entire time living here.
Well, thanks, but I always say that one of the joys of my job is that I get to find out if these things my parents told me were true or not.
That's true. That's a good point.
Excuse me.
Now, as far as where we are today with you, like what are you working on now?
I'm gloriously between things right now.
Gloriously.
Yeah. I had the busiest December of my life. And I finished my 7 weeks in McGee just before the Christmas holidays, and I was in a production down at the Public Theater at the same time. So I was doing both those things all during December, and so I finished both of those. Like I think the show was on like December 17th, and then the show ended down at the Public Theater on the 22nd.
Yeah,
and so then I had like 2 weeks off now. We're going to start 2020 with all kinds of new possibilities. And I've been down to D.C. to talk to PBS. We'd like to see if maybe they would be interested in some more national shows.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
That's still all up in the air. But
now, do you find with you doing what you do for as long as you've done, do you ever worry about like running out of content?
No, that's never a problem.
I don't think so either. You can always find.
What I love is that, life is full of perpetual surprises, and I live for that. I want to be surprised constantly, and I think I am. And so, it's 22 years now since I did my show about hot dogs, and I would love to do another hot dog show just because I think there's so many great hot dog places around America, and we just scratched the surface with that first show.
Yeah.
So, but also PBS is, there's the possibility of doing a show about highways. And I think that's, that would be my dream job.
Highways.
I could do shows on highways for the rest of my life.
What makes you love it?
Well, because everything's on a highway.
Yeah.
And you can do a story about just about anything, from the town itself to the local drugstore, There's always great stories involved, and I think the highway is a nice way to tie it all together. But I also love driving, so
I also love driving. Well, trying to think if there was anything else that I could think of that I wanted to pick your brain with. I feel like I feel overwhelmed. Like there's so many.
Well, that's it. We could talk forever, but there's nothing else I don't think that we need to talk about. And so,
Absolutely.
I don't want to bore anyone. In fact, I
No.
think that, I live by a cameraman that I worked with in South Carolina, Buck Brinson. He always said, if you can't tell the story in a half hour, you can't tell it. So, and I sort of live by that. I still like doing half hour shows.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of hour long and longer shows, but, I still have a love for the half hour and,
Snackable.
yeah,
Snackable
well,
sizes.
nothing is more valuable in life than time.
That's a good point.
And so, and I listen to podcasts in the car, but other than that, it's hard for me to find time to
rip
listen, to something that's a longer form podcast. It's just, I worry about that. I worry about, do I have enough time for everything? It's hard.
That's a good point. Well, let's get to the ending segment of this podcast because I'm excited about this. The ending segment that I do with all of my guests is a segment called Desert Island Questions. Desert Island Questions is a segment where I give each guest 3 categories to take with them on a desert island until their demise. So, the first category on Desert Island Questions is things to watch. So you have 3 choices for this category. You could pick movies, you could pick whole series, TV series, anything you want. 3 choices.
I have to tell you 3.
Yes.
3 things I'd want to watch if I were.
If I took you if I blindfolded you, took you to a desert island like Tom Hanks in Castaway, but you were only able to pick 3 things to watch on any platform, what would they be?
Wow. I think I would be interested in. I'm trying to think of a long form TV show that I didn't watch.
Yeah.
What's the one about drugs in Baltimore?
The Wire.
The Wire.
Yeah.
I've never watched The Wire.
I've never watched it either.
I would love to have The Wire. I'd take the whole set.
That's one of the highest picked TV shows on this podcast is The Wire.
Oh, really?
People want to take that. It's that and The Office. Those are the 2 number ones.
The Office I could live without. I like The Office,
Yeah.
but that's not something. But I would be interested in watching The Wire. I have a great affection for Terry Gilliam's movie Brazil.
Brazil.
I could watch that forever, and I think it's like dense enough that there's things to be discovered all the time.
Different layers.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, maybe you could even set it up because I've heard people refer to it as like a trilogy. There's Time Bandits, which is a really great movie, but sort of almost kid-centered. And then there's Brazil, which is very adult. And I'm not sure what the third one is in that little Terry Gilliam. It may be, he was part of Monty Python.
Oh,
but then he went
okay.
on to make lots of movies.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, he did the movie for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, I did. I saw that.
So, Terry Gilliam, and he's done a lot of stuff recently. He's trying to do Don Quixote, and things keep falling apart.
Oh,
I think there's
wow.
even a documentary film about why he can't make that movie. So Terry Gilliam, I'd say a Terry Gilliam set would be something I'd want to have.
I'll allow that.
And be nice to have something light and funny, wouldn't
Absolutely.
it? To help pass the time. Well, I used to always say that the movie I could watch anytime is Wizard of Oz. So,
that's a great one. That's great.
And why not? I've probably seen it too many times, but I could always watch it again. So, okay, there's my 3 movies. There's three things I'd want to have: The Wire, Terry Gilliam box set, and
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz.
All right, that's good. That's good. Okay, so the second category is 3 books to take with you.
Oh, that's really hard. 3 books to take with me. Yeesh. That's really hard. What would I want to read?
Over and over and over again.
What's funny, I the first thing I would take I'm in the middle now of this. I think it's called a tetralogy, isn't it? A 4-book set by Elena Ferrante. She's a Italian woman novelist, and it's a set of 4 books that she's written about the relationship between these 2 young women. And I think it's called My Brilliant Friend. That's the name of the first novel.
Yeah.
I love that. So now I'm in the middle of the second one, which I think is called The Story of a New Name. One of the girls got married.
Okay.
And it goes on for 4 books, and they're all significant. So I would want to have that.
I'd give the box set.
Yeah, the box set of Elena Ferrante's new stuff. You know what? I have an old textbook of 17th century poetry and prose. I would want to have that.
That'll be good.
I don't know. When I was in college, I became fascinated with 17th century stuff. So, I would love to have that book just because I know there's so many riches there. And the Anatomy of Melancholy, which is a really fun book to read, actually. It's not that melancholic, but
yeah.
All kinds of wonderful poetry that, 17th century can include Shakespeare and all of that. So, I could have that textbook with me.
All right.
Now I need something lighter and stupider.
I saw that a lot of people brought you in a lot of magazines whenever you were in McGee.
Yes.
Are you a magazine person?
I'll read anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I attribute that to my mother. She always said she didn't matter she didn't care what I was reading as long as I was reading.
That's
so
good.
at our house, comic books were fine, dirty books were fine as long as you were reading. I love Elmore Leonard, who is like those are like police. Cop things.
Yeah.
A lot of movies have been made from the books of Elmore Leonard. And that's the other thing I'd say. I'd want a handful of Elmore Leonard books.
All right, that'll be good.
So there's my 3 books. That'll work.
All right. And the last category is 3 things to listen to.
Oh, music.
Yeah.
Wow.
It doesn't necessarily have to be music. It could be anything you want. It could be a podcast. It could be
No, it would have to be music. I'm going to go with music. All 3 music. I don't know. My favorite band is The Band.
The Band.
Yes.
Okay.
So I
watched that movie.
Yeah. Well, the Last Waltz is
The Last Waltz.
That's the end. And I'm actually more fond of earlier stuff than The Last Waltz, but The Last Waltz is also like a greatest hits compilation. So, I love The Band, so I take something by The Band, probably the second album, the sort of brown album that's just called The Band. I'm of the right age. I would want probably the Beatles' White Album.
All right.
And, the songbooks of Ella Fitzgerald.
All right.
She did a bunch of things like in the late 50s, early 60s, where she sort of did the American songbooks, and that's usually called the songbooks. She did one, Cole Porter, and
those are good choices.
Yeah, various things. So yeah, I'm a sucker for that sort of old romantic style music, and I love Ella Fitzgerald's voice. You
have a very nice broad choice as far as what to watch, what to read, and what to listen to.
Well, I always say that as far as music's concerned, I like anything with a lyric.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about instrumental music. I'm a musical illiterate. I don't know anything about music. I can't, I don't know. It always fascinates me how singers know when they come in.
Oh, I've never played an instrument. I've never, I've done a lot of things. I've been very, I've dipped my toe into a lot of different hobbies and pastimes, but music has never been one. And it's one of the most fascinating things is like, I couldn't imagine that feeling of like, being up there and like playing a song and knowing when and knowing what and knowing how to do that and to be able to keep that. I watch, are you familiar with Greta Van Fleet? They are a newer band from Detroit that sound just like Led Zeppelin. Okay. And I went to go see them perform at Stage A, and it was the greatest show I've ever seen. And it blows me away. It's just these guys up there that are just in this moment ripping on this guitar, and I just don't understand how you know where your fingers need to go, how you need them, how to feather it, how to do all this, and that's what's fascinating to me. All right, second to last question is a death row meal. I feel like this might be your hardest question. So do you ever see them articles where they allow a death row inmate their last meal, whatever they want? What would your last meal be?
Wow. Boy, I what would be the last thing I'd want to eat?
Yeah, it's a hard choice.
Yeah. I don't know, something simple. I think maybe something as simple as like a Delmonico steak.
Yeah, that's probably the most. A steak and potato is the most common answer here.
Yeah, no, I could get into that. I had a great pork chop last night at the Carlton. I'd never been to the Carlton restaurant here in Pittsburgh.
I haven't been there either.
And
it was great?
It was great. It was really excellent. And so if there's time to anticipate such a thing, I might have other thoughts, but well,
that's the point of these. This is my whole thought process of the Desert Island questions is like, people, we talk about your life, we talk about everything throughout the podcast. At the end, whenever I ask these questions, I feel like it just starts a motion where things just start popping into your head, and the first things you think about tend to be, some of the most important. So that's why I ask these things. I feel like it gives a little bit extra glimpse into what people like. But a Delmonico steak, I'll even give you the Carlton pork chop. So
actually, and some vanilla ice cream for dessert.
I was just gonna say you have to have a dessert though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did a show about ice cream, and I love unusual flavors of ice cream, but I love vanilla.
Yeah.
And I love the taste of vanilla. So.
Yeah, vanilla's great.
Although at Dave and Andy's in Oakland, they make a sweet cream, which is an unflavored ice cream. It's just the taste of milk.
Really?
And I also love that. So,
wow.
Milk and sugar, sweet cream.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had that. I would love to try that.
Yeah, it's really, they don't have it all the time at Dave and Andy's, but that's where I've had it. And actually, lots of their ice creams there I really still love. I was in a little while ago, and they had Thai. I want to say Thai orange. It was just really good.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Unusual flavors and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I love a good ice cream.
Right.
It's real good.
Big bowl of ice cream on the way out.
And the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could have a conversation with anyone alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Whoa. Who would it be? A conversation with anyone. Well, only because I've mentioned him twice already. I might say Kurt Vonnegut.
All right.
I would love to talk to him.
Yeah.
And actually, I saw him speak a couple of times. And
really?
Yeah, both here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I saw him in South Carolina once, and I saw him twice here in Pittsburgh. And, I just remember so many things that he said. And, I wouldn't mind having some time just to sit and talk to him.
Yeah, I tell people that whenever I ask that question, I like to think that it's just like in a waiting room somewhere, and you got 2 hours, and you're just sitting there talking like regular. That whole like fandom of like that whole aspect of being a fan, that's all out of the way, and it's interesting to hear everyone's answers. Like your episode 101, and it's interesting to hear what everyone says. We've had everything from a South Park character to people like Gandhi, Jesus, everything. And then before I let you get out of here, I'm implementing a new segment. All right, and you're the first one, and it's called the Fish Bowl. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to reach into this bowl right here, and these are questions submitted by other guests. So I'm going to ask you to open or to pick out one of them questions, and read it, and then give me your answer. You're the first one to do this, so
let me put my glasses on so I can read it. All right. The question is, what would be the best way to improve society in the next 5 years? And this is Nigel Whammo.
Yeah. So Nigel is a guest that I had here. He is a DJ at Whammo.
Okay. What would be the best way to improve society in the next 5 years? Easy. Vote.
There we go. Take any second and throw out your website, Instagram, so people know where to grab you at, and I'll let you get out of here.
Well, I'm a pretty regular Facebook guy.
Yes.
I'm Rick Sebak there. Actually, I was on Twitter before I was on Facebook, and at QED, Dave Hallowell and those guys that recommended an unusual name. So on Twitter, I'm Rick Around Here.
Rick Around Here.
Yeah, that's on Twitter. And then I'm also on Instagram as Rick Sebak. And I try to keep up with those three. But at QED.org, you can find lots of my stuff too. And actually, WQED.org/Nebby lets you see the last 8 shows I did. They're all right there. They're also all on YouTube.
Fantastic.
So if you know, there's a Pokemon character named Nebby. So if you Google Nebby, you get a lot of that. But if you put Nebby Kennywood or, you know, Nebby Meet Pittsburgh, MEAT, or
it'll pop up.
McGee. If you put Nebby McGee, it would get you to my stuff, and you know, all the Nebbies are there. And then there are sort of other Sebak productions that are on YouTube, mostly illegally, but I say the more people that get to see it, the better. So I don't think we ever
That's understandable.
pursue any people or anything. So
Any content's good content.
and if you want the DVDs, they're also available at shopwqed.org.
There you go. Everyone that's listening, thank you again as always. We're into the second century of podcasts, and I'm excited for it. Rick, thank you for being a guest.
Honored. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. You can find me. I'll call you right back across the board. Send me an email. Let me know what you like, what you dislike. Call me a piece of shit if you want. Just give me some feedback. Thanks again, and I'll call you right back.